The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, These are the living things that you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth. Whatever parts the hoof and is cloven-footed and chews the cud, among the animals you may eat. Nevertheless, among those that chew the cud or part the hoof, you shall not eat these. The camel, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the rock badger, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the hare, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the pig, because it parts the hoof and is cloven-footed but does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. You shall not eat any of their flesh, and you shall not touch their carcasses. They are unclean to you. These you may eat of all that are in the waters. Everything in the waters that has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, you may eat. But anything in the seas or the rivers that does not have fins and scales, of the swarming creatures in the waters and of the living creatures that are in the waters, is detestable to you. You shall regard them as detestable. You shall not eat any of their flesh, and you shall detest their carcasses. Everything in the waters that does not have fins and scales is detestable to you. And these you shall detest among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are detestable. The eagle, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon of any kind, every raven of any kind, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, the cormorant, the short-eared owl, the barn owl, the tawny owl, the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron of any kind, the hoopoe, and the bat. All winged insects that go on all fours are detestable to you. Yet among the winged insects that go on all fours you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet with which to hop on the ground. Of them you may eat the locust of any kind, the bald locust of any kind, the cricket of any kind, and the grasshopper of any kind. But all other winged insects that have 4 feet are detestable to you. And by these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until the evening, and whoever carries any part of their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every animal that parts the hoof but is not cloven-footed or does not chew the cud is unclean to you. Everyone who touches them shall be unclean. And all that walk on their paws among the animals that go on all fours are unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until the evening, and he who carries their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. They are unclean to you. And these are unclean to you among the swarming things that swarm on the ground: the mole rat, the mouse, the great lizard of any kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that swarm. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until the evening. And anything on which any of them falls when they're dead shall be unclean, whether it is an article of wood or a garment or a skin or a sack, any article that is used for any purpose. It must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the evening. Then it shall be clean. And if any of them falls into any earthenware vessel, all that is in it shall be unclean, and you shall break it. Any food in it that could be eaten, on which water comes, shall be unclean. And all drink that could be drunk from every such vessel shall be unclean. And everything on which any part of their carcass falls shall be unclean. Whether oven or stove, it shall be broken in pieces. They are unclean and shall remain unclean for you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern holding water shall be clean, but whoever touches a carcass in them shall be unclean. And if any part of their carcass falls upon any seed grain that is to be sown, it is clean. But if water is put on the seed and any part of their carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. And if any animal which you may eat dies, whoever touches its carcass shall be unclean until the evening, and whoever eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. And whoever carries the carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every swarming thing that swarms on the ground is detestable. It shall not be eaten. Whatever goes on its belly, and whatever goes on all fours, or whatever has many feet, any swarming thing that swarms on the ground you shall not eat, for they are detestable. You shall not make yourselves detestable with any swarming thing that swarms, and you shall not defile yourselves with them, and become unclean through them. For I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves therefore, and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not defile yourselves with any swarming thing that crawls on the ground, for I am the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law about beast and bird, and every living creature that moves through the waters, and every creature that swarms on the ground, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that may be eaten and the living creature that may not be eaten. The primary lesson in Leviticus 11 is about holiness, obedience, and the importance of setting apart certain behaviors and practices to honor God. Here's a deeper look at its key teachings. 1. Holiness and distinction. God's call to the Israelites to distinguish between clean and unclean animals was a tangible way for them to practice being set apart. The Israelites' dietary choices served as a daily reminder of their covenant with God and their unique identity as His people. The purpose of these laws was to instill the understanding that holiness involves being intentional about what we allow into our lives, whether that's our actions, relationships, or habits. 2. Obedience and discipline. By following dietary restrictions, the Israelites practiced obedience in the small, everyday choices. This was meant to cultivate a habit of discipline that extended to all aspects of life, reinforcing their reverence for God's instructions. It shows that obedience to God isn't limited to big moments. It includes the ordinary, daily decisions. 3. Respect for life and creation. This chapter emphasizes the Israelites' respect for the natural world. Animals were seen as a part of God's creation, each species with a purpose and place. Some animals were considered off-limits for consumption, reminding the people to value life and to recognize that certain creatures were not intended for their use. In today's context, this can inspire reflection on how we treat animals and our environment with respect and responsibility. Number 4, spiritual purity. The dietary laws also symbolize the importance of maintaining purity, not only physically, but spiritually. They remind us to be careful about what influences we consume, as what we take in shapes our hearts, minds, and lives. Just as certain foods were prohibited for the Israelites, we too can be mindful of avoiding influences that might detract from our values or draw us away from our spiritual purpose. How this lesson applies today. In a modern context, Leviticus 11's teachings encourage us to make thoughtful, intentional choices that align with our values. This might mean setting boundaries around the media we consume, the relationships we nurture, or the habits we cultivate, always seeking to uphold what is good and honorable. The passage reminds us that holiness is not just an abstract ideal, but a practical way of living that shows respect for our own well-being, our community, and our connection to the divine. To apply the lessons of Leviticus 11 in a modern life, a person might focus on intentional living, setting boundaries that support spiritual and personal growth, and honoring values in daily actions. Here are some practical ways to put this into practice. 1. Make intentional choices. Just as the Israelites made specific food choices to honor God, we can make choices that align with our values and purpose. This can mean evaluating the influences we allow into our lives, whether through media, relationships, or environments. Ask yourself, does this support my growth, values, and the life I'm trying to build? 2. Set boundaries. Holiness in Leviticus involved setting boundaries between clean and unclean. Similarly, set boundaries to protect your well-being. This could mean limiting time with people who bring negativity, saying no to activities that compromise your values, or creating personal limits around things that distract you from your goals or purpose. 3. Pursue purity in mind and spirit. Consider what you allow into your thoughts and emotions. Avoid things that lead to stress, anxiety, or actions you regret. Spend time with people and in environments that bring you peace, encouragement, and growth. This might look like prioritizing time for meditation, prayer, or other grounding practices that help you stay centered. 4. Honor your body and health. Just as dietary restrictions encouraged the Israelites to treat their bodies with respect, be mindful of how you care for yourself physically. Eat well, get enough sleep, and engage in exercise or activities that nurture your health. Self care is a way of valuing the life and body you've been given. 5. Practice obedience in small things. Leviticus 11 teaches that spiritual growth happens through obedience in everyday choices. Commit to small acts of integrity, like keeping promises, being honest in interactions, and treating others kindly. These small disciplines build a strong foundation of character and integrity. In living out these principles, the goal is not perfection, but consistency and intentionality. By making small, thoughtful choices in everyday life, you're creating habits of purpose and values that can lead to a fulfilled, peaceful, and meaningful life.